And this, in my opinion, is the most important skill or the most important concept for you to know as a software engineer is product engineering. Hey, if you're new to software engineering and if you've just started your career or you're planning to start your career as a software engineer, then this is not the right time for you to watch this video. But if you're someone who's been in this industry for a few years now and you're looking to increase your salary, if you're struggling to increase your salary, or if you're struggling to become a senior software engineer, then this is the right video for you to watch at this time. Now, to triple your salary or even 5x it, like I did in the last few years, there are a few simple steps that you need to follow. There are a few skill sets that you need to acquire. So, when you're giving interviews at companies, you can sound intelligent and you can come across as someone who knows what they're doing. So, without further ado, let's get into the topics that you need to learn and the skills that you need to acquire. Now, the first thing is to obviously write clean and testable code. If you can't write clean code, if you don't write code that is optimized, that is well tested, that is well maintained, very reusable, then there's no way you can become a senior software engineer or command a high salary package. The first and foremost thing that you need to focus on in making sure is that you write clean code that is well tested and it is free of bugs, it is optimized, and anyone can read and understand and reuse it at any time. And if you write clean code, if you write enough test cases, the chances of these bugs creeping into your code are just going to be low and low. So with that out of the way, let's establish that without being able to write clean code, there's no way you are able to become a senior software engineer or even advance in your career as a software engineer. Now, let's look at some of these topics that you need to understand in order to sound as someone who knows what they're doing in software engineering in 2025. The first thing that you need to focus on are microservices and the microservice architecture. Now, what are microservices? So consider you have a monolithic app server, and you would know what a monolithic app server is if you have already built some backend applications in your software development journey. If you've written some APIs and all of those APIs are combined into a single server, a single application, then that's a monolithic server. But consider this, if you want to scale out or if you want to scale up, it's very difficult because all of these services are packed together. They're all scrambled into one large application. And if you just want to auto scale, or if you just want to scale up or scale out just one single service, because that is a service that's taking up a lot of resources, it gets very difficult to do that. That is why microservices come in. With the microservices architecture, all of these individual services have an image or a container of their own. They all live separately and they have a life of their own. So now if there is a single service, let's call it the payment service, that is taking up a lot of load, that's getting a lot of requests, and you want to scale up just the payment service and not, let's say, the notification service that is barely used for maybe utilizing 20% of its resources. You don't want to scale the notification service. You can just scale the payment service because that itself is a separate container. It's running as an application of its own, and you can just scale the microservice that is made for payments. That is very simply put what the microservice architecture looks like. And you don't need to work with microservices, you don't need to implement them, but just understanding how they work, how they scale, how they are written, and how they are deployed, most importantly, will give you a good solid understanding of how microservices work. So if you are applying for a company that uses microservices, you can come across as someone who knows what they're doing when it comes to microservices, and you can have a very positive impression. As we progress in the video, we'll discuss more and more advanced topics that are not as often used or as often talked about maybe, but the most senior people in your team might be using these skill sets. They might have these skill sets, they might be using these technologies. So it's good for you to know how these work, and you can also talk about these in your next interview. Now the next topic is message brokers. So if you know anything about microservices, you must have heard about event driven microservices. Now, event-driven microservices have a very important component called message brokers. Now, what is a message broker? A message broker is simply put a broker or an agent that will take message from point A to point B. In our case, point A is a producer and point B is a consumer. Now, message brokers like Kafka are very widely used, especially with high scaling applications that have a lot of users. Kafka or even RabbitMQ are really top choices for message brokers. How these work is that there is a producer that produces a message onto something called as a topic. Now there are different consumers to these topics. Usually these are services that run in an event-driven manner. For example, the user goes through a checkout flow, and as soon as they complete the payment, an event is triggered that causes an action in the microservice that sends a notification to the user confirming their payment. Now this particular use case does not require the user to keep waiting on the payment screen for the notification to go out to them, right? This is something that can happen asynchronously, and hence the term event driven. With traditional REST APIs, the ones that you create with HTTPS or etc., all these different verbs, these are REST APIs that work in a request response format. Now, what does that mean? That when you make a request, you're waiting constantly to get a response, and only once you get a response, or you get an error code, or you don't get a response and you time out, that is when you stop polling for an answer. With event-driven microservices, it's different in a way where you trigger an event and you forget about it. And whenever the service that is supposed to act on this event has finished processing, you will have another event produced maybe, or something change in the database that to tell you the new status of your request. That's how event-driven microservices work. And Kafka or RabbitMQ or any other message broker, it plays an important part in building an event-driven microservice. The reason message brokers are very important is because, like I said, microservices are very important, and event-driven microservice has been picking up pace for quite a long time now. So if you still not heard about event-driven microservices, then you definitely need to read up upon microservices and message brokers both. Now, when we've been talking about message brokers and microservices, all of that, you must have guessed, or you must have been wondering how these get deployed on the cloud. Because nowadays, no one uses on-prem infrastructure, right? Everyone uses cloud providers like GCP, AWS, Azure. They all provide a lot of resources for you to just plug and play, or just use these resources on the go, on the fly, and it costs you very little as well. Same way, you want to learn how these services are deployed on the cloud. You don't need to become a DevOps engineer if that's not what you want, but just learning how these applications are containerized, how they are orchestrated, etc. All of this is very important for you to know how these services are deployed on the cloud. Now, the few things that I recommend you read up upon or try to use is Jenkins for CI/CD, Docker for containerization, and Kubernetes for orchestration. Now, Kubernetes by itself is a very complicated software. Lots of people, even DevOps engineers, don't fully understand how Kubernetes work or don't know everything about Kubernetes. So I don't expect you to learn everything on Kubernetes, but I would suggest just get started. Just read up upon how applications or Docker containers are orchestrated, how pods work, how autoscaling works, etc. All of that with Kubernetes. And another important thing to think of is security. As we move to cloud, as these applications grow bigger and bigger, as we have more and more users onboarded, security becomes something to consider the most. Most developers don't even consider security issues. They don't even know what kind of security threats their applications may possess. But if you think about security, if you think about common attack patterns like DDoS attacks or SQL injections or cross-site scripting, etc., just having a basic understanding of, let's say, the OWASP principles or 12-factor apps will give you a tremendous edge over others, where you are able to build software that is secure right from the start. So you might have bugs, but you can guarantee that there won't be any major security loopholes in your software, because as soon as someone discovers a security loophole, your credibility drops considerably, and you are looked down upon as a software developer. And that is the genuine truth of this industry. You cannot have insecure applications running on the cloud. You definitely cannot call yourself a senior software engineer if you don't know about these basic security principles. So learning about cloud and security is very important. You don't need to become a DevOps engineer, but just knowing how things work on the cloud is really important. Now, as you might have guessed, with applications growing larger and larger, it becomes difficult to scale, but it also becomes slow. The applications become slow. You might have experienced this with a lot of products, a lot of services, especially the government apps, that they are extremely slow, extremely painful to work with. In my opinion, anything that takes longer than 3 seconds as a REST API is just way too slow. And this, I mean, from the point the user clicks on a button, let's say, and gets a response back. If it takes more than 3 seconds, you're just way too slow, and you should consider asynchronous operations. But how do you fit everything? How do you fit a complex operation in just under 3 seconds? Especially where you're making a lot of database calls, you're querying the database, you're reading and writing from the database, right? That's where database optimization comes in. Now, whenever you're building an API that uses a database, or you're querying a database, or you're writing to a database, you need to make sure that you're finding the best and the most optimal approach to build your SQL query or your NoSQL commands. With growing scale, sharding and partitioning also become important. Your database may be sharded into multiple different shards, or you may partition your data into different partitions. Your database might be scaled to a very large extent. The data might be spread across globally. Now, these type of enhancements bring a different set of issues of their own. So you need to learn how scaling works at a database level, how sharding and partitioning work, and most importantly, you also must learn how to build very optimized queries. You should not use any commands in your queries that take a lot of time, that are very ill performant. You definitely should look at creating the necessary indexes, etc., to make sure that any query that you write is fully performant and it does not take away a lot of time. A lot of traction in 2024, and definitely going to continue in 2025, is usage of LLMs and Gen AI. Now, whenever someone says they are an AI company, what they really mean is that, in most cases, what they really mean is that they are just using some open source or some publicly available LLM API, and then they're just using some prompts to generate some response and fit it in within their business applications. So a lot of companies nowadays are coming up with products that are simply built around, they're just simply wrapper applications built around existing LLMs, and they don't really have a moat of their own. Such companies definitely fail over a long period of time. But if you're working at a company, or if you're building a product that has its own moat, it has its own advantages, or it has been in existence for a long time, and you're using AI to enhance your outcome, enhance the delivery of your software to your end customers, then that is where you can play a significant role, where LLMs can play a significant role. And you, as a software engineer, if you know how LLMs work, now you don't need to build a large language model, or know how to build any machine learning models, but just understanding how deep neural networks work, how large language models work, what are the different components of a large language model, and how prompting works, that's good enough for you to know how to use these LLMs in your applications for the most part. Obviously, I'm not talking about building something that is so huge and it relies entirely upon AI, but like I said, a lot of companies are jumping on the AI bandwagon, and it will be very beneficial for you to know how to write good quality prompts. If you can write good quality prompts that enhance the output of your application, and you can leverage LLMs to your benefit, then that is something that is highly sought out as a skill set in software engineers, and that's going to continue in 2025 for sure. The next skill set I would suggest you try out is real-time communication. You must have got on calls on Google Meet or Zoom or Microsoft Teams, right? These are all applications that support real-time communication, so you can communicate with your peers, your friends, your family, your colleagues, etc. in real time. You can chat, you can call them, you can have a video call with them in real time, and all the data is transferred in a P2P, as a peer-to-peer network, in real time. Web sockets have been widely used for real-time communication. WebRTC is a real-time communication protocol that has been open source for a long time now. And that if you learn what a WebRTC is, what Socket.io does, etc., you can build some really cool applications that leverage real-time communication. Now, I have a video on WebRTC, a basic tutorial, where I'm showing you how to build a video call app on this channel. Go ahead and check that out after watching this video. It will give you a good background of WebRTC, and you can probably learn more about the technology itself, because the skill set for real-time communication is not something that all companies need, but the companies that require the skill set, they pay really well, and they look for engineers that are experienced in this domain, experienced with the skill set, and not a lot of engineers have this kind of an experience. So if you're some of those people who would learn how real-time communication works, build some applications using WebRTC or Socket.io, that could give you a good edge over other engineers who are applying to companies that require skills with real-time communication. Now, the last skill, and this in my opinion is the most important skill, or the most important concept for you to know as a software engineer, is product engineering. Now, what is a product engineer? A product engineer is someone who can do the job of a product owner as well as an engineer. Now, what that means is that as an engineer, you're able to think about the business, you're able to think about the product itself, you can build, or you can think about the features that your product may require, in addition to building those features with technology, right? Now, engineering does not exist if there's not enough business use, right? You might agree that having something that is very technically advanced, is a very well built software product, but there's no need of it, there's no business use case, then that product is more often than not going to waste, right? So understanding how the business works, how the product works, what people are looking for in your product becomes a very important skill set. And if you can become a product engineer, that's definitely going to give you an edge over everyone else, because not a lot of people think about product when they're doing engineering, especially not the junior developers. But as you grow ahead, as you get ahead in your career, as you become more and more senior in your career, you are expected to also think about the product and the business in addition to engineering. So the sooner you become a product engineer, the better. And that is a skill set that you must definitely try to include, that definitely try to build in your career. The sooner the better. Now, product engineering is not something I can talk about in just one video of 15 minutes. But if you want a dedicated video on product engineering, do feel free to comment down below, and I'll definitely try to create one. Lastly, I want to give you some bonus tips on tripling or even 5x your salary. Now, communication is the most important as a developer. If you're able to communicate with your teammates, if you're able to explain the problems that you're working on, or the solutions that you're coming up with, or the challenges that you're facing, then you're halfway there. Being able to communicate clearly without wasting anyone's time is a key skill set in today's world. You must have seen everyone around you scrambling for time, trying to find time to do their own work. So if you're someone who's not able to communicate clearly, people are not going to like working with. So being able to communicate with others, being able to clearly articulate your problems, being able to talk technically is a very important skill set, and you should practice more on how you can communicate better with your teammates, and definitely with your seniors or key business people. Another important thing that we should do is read tech blogs, watch YouTube videos, because technology is advancing every single day. Every day you will come across a new technology enhancements or an advancement in the news. You need to keep yourself up to date. If you're someone who is just focusing on one skill set and one skill set only, because that is the thing that you started with as your in your career, then you're not going to get far ahead as a software engineer, because software engineers need to adapt continuously, because every day there is a new technology that is better than what was already there, right? So if you're not reading up on what new is out there in the technology world, not watching videos of how different things work, what are the new improvements in the tech world, then you're really behind a lot of people. And even if you're a junior developer, if you keep yourself up to date, you can talk and you can act like a senior developer. And senior developers, if you don't do this, then you could in some cases be far behind the junior developers themselves. Finally, my personal recommendation to improve your skills to become a very good software engineer is to try and build your own company, try and build your own product. You don't even need to legally register a company. Just build a product. It may be something that already exists out there, but that's okay. You just build something and you launch it as a product. You try to gain users, you try to get user feedback on your application. The more you do that, the more you'll understand how the industry works, how users perceive your product, how you can understand, you can think like a business, and you can even probably learn some financial related things in the business world, right? All of these are really important skill sets if you can build as a software engineer. I started my own company in 2022. We built a very cool low code platform, and that gave me a lot of sense on how users have been using our product. While I was a CTO of that company, I was able to interact with investors, I was able to interact with clients firsthand, and it gave me a good perspective of what I should consider when I'm thinking about building a feature, or things that I should consider that might play an important part in the future of the product. So if you can do these things, if you can try to build a company, it will give you a solid boost in your career. So these are the things that I recommend you to learn if you want to triple your salary as a software engineer. Now I know a lot of it is very difficult. You can't become an expert on any of these things in such a short period of time. But if you just learn these concepts, if you just learn how things work for these technologies that I mentioned in the video, then you're halfway there and you've taken a good step towards the next step in your career. So yeah, if you want to keep watching similar videos, do drop a comment down below, do like my channel, do like my video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll try to keep posting more and more informative content for you. And do comment down below if you have suggestions or if you want some topics to be covered. I'll definitely try to cover all of that.